back to the Nutrimedical Report, Clay and Iron Show, with amazing ancient archaeologist Jonathan Gray. And, of course, his website is beforeus.com, beforeus.com. And before us, this is important. It corroborates the Bible. It corroborates the nature of the Most High God, and it also corroborates the nature of what we are. I call them the mathematical corollaries of the spirit world and the nature of reality, which are extremely important. So the underpinnings of our ancient archaeology not only proves the Bible, but delineates the nature of what we are as beings. And with those specific principles, we can then approach the world with much more logic, much more hope, and hope in not only God, but also the nature of humanity, that we can overcome the evil that has pinned us down and caused destruction of our world multiple times. And we've talked about this previously on the program, Jonathan. So we're going over your latest book, which is Dead Men's Secrets Updates. And what chapter are we into now, and what were we talking about? Because last week we talked about a lot of the underground cities and tunnels.
Yes, well, I thought today we'd have a medley, a fruit salad of various interesting things that we've got scattered through the book. These are all very short, interesting facts, which I think the public would like to know about.
Yeah, and a lot of time people are, we call, overwhelmed. The reason is they're not being taught these in their church. They're not being taught in the public forums or in their universities. They're not being told the true history of the nature of what we've gone through over the last number of thousands of years. We've not been taught the cataclysms that have happened, including previous nuclear wars or nearer space objects that have brought destruction to Earth and cataclysmic changes. And we've not been taught about the good and evil in the universe, or the interaction with these advanced beings that have caused great destruction to mankind, or literally have saved our butt many times. We're not really understanding the nature of what our world is, and as a result we become victims. And again, if the truth will set you free, you're trying to provide truth so people will understand that the Bible is true, the promises are true, and the very nature of what we are has been promised by Yeshua Jesus. He said, when I return, you shall be as I am. So he's really saying, as you need to repent and start listening and hearing from God, but you have to understand the nature of what you are first, because you're not highly evolved slime like the evolutionists and communists and the transhumanists want to talk about. You're made in the image of the Creator God, and you need to understand that unless you grasp that nature and that image, you're going to be destroyed by evil. And that's what you're teaching, is you're teaching people that they don't need to seek or become a victim of evil. They can understand the nature of what they are by understanding ancient archaeology. So by reading your books, it gives them a hope that what the Bible says is true.
Well, as Jesus said, the truth shall set you free. Exactly,
yeah. So let's go through some of the salad of different items, and we'll hopefully expand on them so that people can see, yes, there's corroboration in the modern world. Some of it's classified corroboration, but also it just makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. Now, of course, the Bible tells us that man was created with a very high intelligence. He was given a perfect brain, one which could actually appreciate and manufacture objects. And like his creator, God created, well, man can make things out of what's been created. And it's amazing just what accomplishments were in the past. Now, I'm sure that most people haven't heard of the mechanical devices in the past, the things that used to actually move around because, well, let's give an example. We've got Nero. Nero had a revolving banquet room where he had his parties, and this room actually rotated. It revolved automatically.
Right.
Now, there was machinery activating it, and now archaeologists have for the first time found the remains of a banquet room built by Nero. Now, Nero ruled between 54 and 68 AD, and he was famed for his depraved and extravagant lifestyle. And this circular dining space was part of Nero's Golden Palace on Rome's Palatine Hill. Well, actually, not just the Palatine Hill, but the Esquiline and the Caelian Hills, because it was huge and it spread over a large area, and it was rotated by an impressive piece of machinery, which was unique, quite unique, according to what's been found now. And it revolved slowly but continually. It revolved at the speed at which the Earth revolves on its axis, so that you come down. Today is it's 2:11 p.m. your time, Dr. Bill.
Right.
And if you set the banquet room going, it would come round to the same spot at 2:11 p.m. tomorrow.
Wow.
It has precisely at the speed of the rotation of the Earth. So this implies
these facts are amazing, aren't they? I mean, how could they have accomplished this so long ago?
Yes. So this does show us that they not only had mechanical equipment, but they also knew the precise, to the minute, astronomical facts that we have now been able to confirm.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So the banquet room proves ancient machinery and ancient astronomical high knowledge. So it's fascinating to me. I find that a wonderful discovery.
Now, what people should understand is you also have got a book about the star signs, that the gospel was actually located in the star signs in the heavens. And that's one of your ebooks we went over several years ago, which ties with this the idea that God literally even puts his plan for mankind and the universe even in the star signs above Earth, which shows how sovereign he is. That you actually have the placement of the stars to present symbology to actually explain to human beings the nature of who he is and what we are, and his plans for us.
Yes, that is absolutely right. And as I think we went into the fact there in that subject, Dr. Bill, that star signs that represent star signs are not an astrological thing. They're an astronomical understanding that long before astrology, the counterfeit was invented, and that certain star signs represented certain events in the coming history of the world relating to man's salvation, and that at certain times when events were to take place, the correct star sign was overhead or appearing on the horizon to suit that particular event. In other words, the movement of the stars was pre-programmed to fit the prophecy that was in the stars, so that when that prophetic event to indicate it.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing, isn't it? And of course, this parallels with some of the pagan Mayan things as well. It talks about the edge of the galaxy or the cosmic plane, and of course the pagans also had a what are called distorted version of it, which is why modern astrology is not like ancient astrology. Astrology and astronomy were basically the same thing until it was perverted. And right. People should know that. What's the name of that star signs book that you talked about?
The Sting of the Scorpion.
Sting of the Scorpion. Yeah, that's excellent. What's the other part of the salad now? Salad issues that.
well, here's one more. It's in the mechanical field. A stylized model has been found of an ancient geared earth-moving machine in Panama. And it contains a system of mechanical gears, including cog wheels on an axle with a rocker arm between them, 2 more rocker arms in the rear, and a jaguar-shaped mouth with teeth-like bucket grips in the front. And the spade-like features on one side and the rear are very, very obvious. Now, this is believed to be a prehistoric. We call it prehistoric because we don't know how far back. We don't have recorded history here. All we have is objects and pictures, and the objects, of course, tell the story themselves. And this is a model of a real working vehicle, and it would probably help us to explain the construction triumphs we've been finding in ancient Americas, because a lot of things have been found now, and they could not have been constructed without some kind.
Lots more topics to talk about. Let's continue with our discussion. A lot of people say, why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant because it gives you a different perspective of the nature of what reality is. It gives you a different perspective of the nature of society and civilization, and the fact that to a great extent everything has been perverted. Satan can't destroy anything, but he can pervert it. The only creator and destroyer is actually God, believe it or not. And people need to understand, once we know the nature of mankind and how we can be a, quote, a child of the Most High, then we can end up becoming much more powerful.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. I'd just like to list 2 or 3 things which are of interest to me in the mechanical field. They actually had steam-powered organs in the past, and the Greeks had that.
Right.
In Egypt, they had a 2-cylinder steam engine, which embodied the principles of both the turbine and jet propulsion.
Right.
They actually, in Alexandria, they were manufacturing jet engines, would you believe? And
yeah,
Greece,
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, in Greece, they were manufacturing petrol vapor machines. Back in Egypt, they had a speedometer registering the distance travelled by a vehicle. So when a vehicle was going along, they had the counters going, and you could just look at it and say, oh, we've come so far already. So these are things which we never anticipate the ancients even thought about. But not only that, but they could actually provide in China and also in Peru. In ancient times, they had seismographs. They probably had them worldwide, but we found evidence in these 2 countries. Seismographs providing data to pinpoint the epicenter of an earthquake anywhere in the world. They had that capacity.
Really?
We go back now to Egypt, we go to Athens in Greece, and we find that in these 2 centres we have evidence they had coin slot machines. So if we think that slot machines are just a modern invention, we've got to revise our thinking. So there's just a few ideas of the mechanical field and how these people were involved in so much that we have never given them credit for. Plus walking robots. Over 2,000 years ago in Egypt, there were more than 100 different kinds of robots recorded. They had human-like robots in Greece that walked, and actually one of them got out of control and started running away. These are recorded actually by historians. In Peru, they had a robot that spoke and gave answers to questions. Now, I'd put in my mind there with a question mark, could this be some kind of computer that was attached to the invention? And in France, so we've got France, and Peru and Greece, where you have robots that walk and talk.
Amazing.
Very, very interesting.
Now, of course, one of the things that people should understand is a lot of the technology that was brought to mankind was brought by civilizations and beings from other realms. And that's clearly in the Bible. It's in every ancient holy book in the world. And people say, well, that sounds strange. That sounds like UFO stuff. Well, I like to call them IFEs, Identified Fiendish Entities. The 200 that landed in northern Lebanon that passed technology onto the humankind is clearly stated right in the Bible. And people say, well, I believe the Bible, but I don't know if I believe that. Well, it's in your Bible, and it tells you that they left their first estate, these beings, and they actually transferred technology and even hybridized themselves with human women and created the great men of old, or the men of renown, or the giants, the Nephilim. And people say, no, they can't have done that. Well, Jesus' brother Jude actually quotes it, or James quotes it right in the New Testament, and he knew of and had access to the book of Jasher and the ancient book of Enoch. But people just, because they've been removed or taken out of the, quote, regular canon of the Bible, they just don't believe that this is real, but, it is.
I'd like to speak about ancient letters and postal service, Dr. Bill, because communication...
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure we all like reading old letters. I mean very, very old letters. And now, as a boy, I used to write letters to my friends with what we were pleased to call invisible ink. And we pretended we were spies or some such thing, smuggling messages to each other without the teacher noticing. And it was fun because they truly were invisible. And anyone who could intercept the letter would look at it closely but see nothing more than a blank page. Well, how did we crack the secret messages that we received from our friends, making them visible again? The key was in the writing of the letter. We first dipped our pens in lemon juice, which was our only ink, and as the lemon juice dried, the writing was totally invisible on the page. Right. And then one of us received such a letter. All we had to do was place it near the heat of a flame, and there you were, the invisible words would turn brown. And I guess as far as I know, that's about as close as most of us ever get to becoming a secret agent, but it was fun.
Right.
Anyway, speaking of letters, I was going through some old time-brown letters a few years ago belonging to my mother when she was a child, and I found that interesting. And one of them, I recall, jumped up at me, which was quite a bit older. 1,600 years old, written in the year 404 AD. Now, that wasn't written by my mother, but by a ship's passenger to someone back home. Now, I'd like to describe this because I think it's very, very fascinating. This man's boat was crossing the Mediterranean Sea when it was struck by a storm, and he was suspicious. He says, I didn't think that the crew was very competent. They seemed to be fumbling around a bit and not knowing what they were doing in the storm. And the men groaned, and the passenger women shrieked, and everybody called upon God, crying aloud, remembering their dear ones at home. And only the name of the captain, he said, was Amarantus, and only this captain, Amarantus, was in good spirits. Because he thought he was now going to get out of paying his creditors. Now, this is the letter. I'm reading the letter for you. And then this letter writer says, I noticed that the soldiers who were part of the Arab cavalry unit had all drawn their swords. And I asked why and learnt that they preferred to belch up their souls to the open air on the deck rather than gurgle them up to the sea. Then someone called out that all who had any gold should hang it around their neck, and those who had gold did so, both gold and anything else of the value of gold. The women not only put on their jewellery, but they handed out pieces of string to any who needed them. And he goes on to write, this is a time-honoured practice, and the reason for it is this. You must provide the corpse of someone lost at sea with the money to pay for a funeral, so that whoever recovers it, profiting by it, won't mind giving your body a little attention. The ship was rushing along under full canvas because we couldn't shorten sail. Time and again we laid hands on the lines but gave up because they were jammed in the blocks. And secretly we began to be equally afraid that even if we escaped from the raging sea, we would be approaching land in the dead of night.
Some of the things that I call you in this salad of different interesting ancient archaeology. What's the next item you'd like to cover?
Well, I'll just finish off this man's letter first.
Yes, so finish the letter for us first, yeah. Yeah.
Now, he's writing about the terror that everybody had in the storm and how they didn't trust the crew, and they were taking precautions that they would have some valuable things around their necks so they'd get a decent burial if their body was ever found.
Right.
And then he goes on saying that secretly we began to be equally afraid that even if we did escape from the raging sea, we'd be approaching land in the dead of night in this helpless condition. But day broke before this happened, and we saw the sun, and never with greater pleasure. Then he goes on to say, as the heat of day came on, the wind moderated, and with the wetness out of the ropes, we were able to use them and handle sail. To replace with a storm sail was impossible. It was in the pawn shop. So the shipping company was having a tough financial time. We took the sail in like the folds of a tunic, and within 4 hours, we, who had been expecting death, find ourselves disembarking in a remote, deserted spot with not a town nor farm near by for 15 miles around. The ship was tossing in the open roads, for the spot had no harbour, held by one anchor. The second anchor had been sold because the ship was short of money, and Mr. Amarantus, the captain, did not own a third. When we touched beloved land, we embraced it like a living mother. Well, talk about cash problems in our day. Even back then, 1,611 years ago, they were having financial troubles too. It was tough trying to keep the business afloat back then. And they had pawnbrokers, they had creditors, they had to sell an anchor to keep going. Well, you know, who said that there's nothing new under the sun, Dr. Bill?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, the fact is that writing was common. The skeptics have been charging that ancient man was primitive and dumb and he couldn't read and write. Well, we're finding now that there was not only correspondence being written, but we have traces of personal letters left behind by Roman soldiers who were in different countries of the world, where they had to patrol barren landscapes on the edge of the empire. And we have letters from Hadrian's Wall in Britain, letters written by Roman soldiers 2,000 years ago. Actually, this is one of the letters that's been found, and this is a man writing, receiving a letter from his wife. And it says, "I have sent you several pairs of socks from Satua, 2 pairs of sandals and 2 pairs of underpants." Another letter contains an invitation from a woman, and the woman's name, she signed it as Flavia Severa, presumably the wife of a senior soldier, to another. And another fragment covered with excerpts from the poet Virgil. Seems to have been a writing exercise scrawled by a child in school. So here we have, as early as 4,000 years ago, information that writing was fairly common. We have the letter of a Babylonian woman to her husband in his travels, in which she told him that the little ones are well, and she asks advice on some trivial matter. We have the letter of a son to his father, in which he informs his dad that so-and-so has mortally offended him, that he would beat up the offender, but he would like to ask his father's advice first. We have another letter in which a son urges his father to send at last the long-promised money, and he offers the insolent inducement that he'll then pray for his father again. And so this points to a well-organised system of communication by letter and of a postal system. You know, we're talking about 4,000 years ago, a time when we've been told that people were still fairly primitive, but now we discover they had an organised postal system. How about that?
Amazing. Really pretty amazing. So a lot of the inventions of today are actually just reinventions of things that existed in the ancient world.
Absolutely, yes. And I think it was Thomas Edison who made a statement when the telephone became something that could be used in a general sense. He said, the old inventions have been reinvented. So he had access to information about ancient telephones.
Yeah, and then but a lot of this information was sequestered in the Vatican Library. I know that Nikola Tesla's father was a Greek Orthodox monk, but he actually, for some reason or other, had access to the Vatican Library, and apparently some of the books went to Nikola, who had this gift of invention where he could literally visualize inventions in his mind without building a model, and then just go to the actual design without even drawing up plans. Yes. He had this very similar, I guess, to Da Vinci, who had the capacity to do that. And in fact, most people don't realize that Da Vinci was a master at making weapons of warfare. In fact, that's his primary job. I mean, he was an artist on the side.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, interesting. So,
now, Dr. Bill, why don't we make a little trip up to the Onega River in Russia for a few minutes?
Let's do that.
Russian archaeologists working in Karelia have come upon what has been termed prehistoric cinema. Now, this is an astonishing work of art, carvings designed to produce a 15-minute moving picture sequence with the brilliance of a neon sign. And what it consists of is a gallery of 600 sketches that have been incised into a cliff of hard granite rising vertically from the waters of a lake, and ingeniously designed to blend the effect of rippling water reflection with setting sunlight. Now, when the sun nears the horizon, the granite shines dark red, and the various coloured lines of the pictures become very clear in rotation. Now, the countless tiny crystal prisms of the incisions reflect much more light than the surrounding smooth areas, and they shine intensely. And the luminous pictures then begin to move. As the sun starts going down, the pictures begin to move. A frog seems to turn into an elk, and a hunter makes a movement with the hand. And then we see him throw his axe with his right hand, and he puts out his left arm to keep his balance as his campfire is flickering. And this magnificent spectacle lasts a quarter of an hour until the setting sun makes the designs grow weaker. Now, these go on and off in rotation like neon lamps, and they seem to move, and the same effect is seen of, you've got tiny prisms in the unequal surfaces of the designs that act like lamps, so that at moments some of them become more luminous than others. And you've got two currents of light, one from the setting sun, one from the moving water, and these give the impression that the whole design is moving. It's very, very cleverly done.
That's kind of amazing. It's a form of light reflective optics that you don't see even in modern art today. I mean, I mentioned a modern artist, if they grasp this, could make quite a name for themselves, but it's not been reproduced in modern art, is it?
No, it's not been reproduced by anybody. But these ancient artists must have had a clear idea of what they wanted to show, as well as acute vision, steady hands, and even a wrong cut in the sharp silica could have ruined the whole thing for good, because granite is a canvas that won't allow you to correct anything.
Exactly. Now, the other thing that's interesting about these ancient artists and so on is that where did their knowledge come from to do these kind of things? Because we know, for example, light optics by Newton were not, in a sense, rediscovered until many, many centuries later. Amazing. BeforeUs.com with Jonathan Gray, back in just a moment. Stay tuned. Let's continue. Do you want to continue that story or anything new that you have?
Yes. Actually, while we're talking about ancient art, in ancient Germany, actually, there has been discovered giant stones resembling human heads that were cut up by an excavator, a modern excavator actually, but some of the figures had two faces, and when they were turned 125 degrees, a man's face turned into a woman's face. Now, something similar has been found in Peru on the plateau of Macahusi, and they've found outdoor carvings which, according to the angle of vision, have several faces, but you have to move to the right spot to distinguish each of them. And as you move, they disappear or change into other figures. Many become invisible and invisible again, depending upon how you move around them. And there are some of these which can be seen only at noon or at twilight or at certain other hours or at one of the solstices and at no other time. This is quite mysterious. You've got visible, then invisible ancient sculpture. That's been found in lots of places, actually, not just South America, but in England, France, Europe. And this particular one on the plateau in Peru is the figure of an old man, and that's when you photograph it, and then it changes into the carved face of a radiant youth. Now, how can you explain a sculptural skill like that, which is revealed only in the photograph? It's when you photograph it, it then changes. And it's hard to see, so what you see with your eye, the photograph picks up something different. And it's revealed only in the photograph. So how could the artist have achieved this effect, even with the benefits of modern science? Now, the artist needed incomparable skill to make the shapes appear only from certain angles and under certain specific conditions of sunlight. And these examples, these sculptures, cover a whole square mile, and they use complete cliffs, and they show the images of the main human races and of animals from all parts of the world. And every type of sculptural technique is used: bas-relief, engraving, the play of light and shade. The sculptors scientifically utilised the laws of perspective and optics to the maximum. Now, that's something that modern artists have not been able to do.
I don't know how they managed to do that. It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing how they managed. We don't know how they managed to do it, but we know that they did because the effect can be seen when we look at them with the naked eye, move around, and if we take a camera and photograph them, then something different comes up. Now that really is a big mystery how they did it, because it's an actual fact. You can go there and reproduce that effect yourself.
Uh-huh. Well, what if you were to pick out the top 2 or 3 facts of maybe all the research you've done over, 40 years?
Yep.
What would be the most remarkable 3 facts that you've discovered in your ancient archaeology? If you were just to pull them out of the air and say, they're in my book, Dead Men's Updates, or several of the other books, what would be the top 3 most remarkable things you found?
Now, you've asked me a very difficult question. But I think the ancient artistry is one. The particular things we've mentioned today would certainly be one of them. I do believe that the maps of the world, 14 ancient maps which we've discovered, which are maps of a round world which appear to have been taken with the aid of aeronautics. In other words, there had to have been a survey of the Earth from above. Is another one that's very, very important. And ancient machinery. I guess that's something we just don't. I can't really say these are the top 3 because we've got some more amazing things like ancient flight and television. Where you can actually see other parts of the world in an ancient instrument, and one of these still survives in China. Wow.
In other words, things like cathode ray tubes. One of the things we talked about several years ago was a tube-type system that was developed in Egypt, and even a battery that exists as long as almost 4,000 years ago. Right? I think we maybe lost Jonathan briefly. We'll try to reconnect.
You lost me for a moment. Something cut in and something cut out. But I'm back with you.
Ah, good. Because it didn't sound like you're totally disconnected. It sounded like I heard a clunk like something disconnected. So the technology, one of the ones that I've seen with Zaki Hawass, and they never really kind of discussed this, but the Egyptians not now and not 3,000 years ago had the technology themselves to build the pyramids. We don't. We can't build a pyramid-like structure to the tolerance of those buildings today, even with the most advanced nations and stone-cutting equipment we have. We couldn't do it, could we?
No, we can't do it. There's lots of things that they could do that we can't do. In fact, I have written another smaller book, 64 Secrets Still Ahead of Us, 64 ways in which the ancient world is ahead of us, but we've caught up on a few of these since I wrote the book, but we're still a way behind what they could do.
I guess I want to coin a term for you. The start of wisdom begins at the end of the admission of the lack of knowledge.
Oh, I like that.
Which means, basically, you don't become wise until you realize how ignorant you are.
Yes. You can say that you can't realize that unless you are wise, but you can't become wise unless you realize it.
Right, it's all like a beginning loop, and which is why there's so few wise people in society, whether it's medical wisdom to treat cancer or reverse illnesses, or the ability to deal with geopolitical and other problems. And one of the things that I've put a challenge forward to people is I've told them, whether it's a engineering, a geopolitical, a financial, or any other problem on Earth, they can call into the show and I will give them an answer instantly, or a framework for an answer on any problem they can present. And people say, that's not possible. I said, well, do it. And the reason is because all these answers exist. Another statement I like to say is, what I know and what God is always sufficient. In other words, when we recognize how ignorant we are and we pray to God for answers in the time of our troubles, He'll always provide answers to it. Some of it's in your ancient archaeology, which says God's there. We're not really discovering something. We're rediscovering something that's always been there. And because God is the author of all that knowledge, if we literally come in prayer and humbleness, that's why it says in 2 Chronicles, if my people are called by my name will humble themselves, I will heal their land. Well, the healing isn't just God waving his hand and recreating the land. It's inspiring us to have the technology, the wisdom, and the logic in order to be able to fix the land.
Yes, so, he will answer our prayers in the way that he sees as best.
Right, exactly. So when people feel helpless, they're just like I saw this foundation called the Keshe Foundation, where they have this Iranian man born in 1958 with the kind of the vague inklings of plasma technology that wanted to have this peace treaty. Well, the thing is, the will of mankind can never bring about peace, only the Spirit of the Most High. As it says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual principalities and wickedness in high places. And the problem is, wisdom never starts with the God of forces, which was what Satan is. He is a narcissist and a power broker and a self-proclaimed small g God who wants to displace the big G God. And the fact is, in people that rely on the wisdom of man, they're never going to find solutions, whether it's to our election here in America, or the environmental catastrophes of playing around with geoengineering the weather, or the proliferation of nuclear weapons, or financial systems that don't have a jubilee year, and the forgiveness of debt, which is part of the rules of ancient Israel that allowed their economy to continue to grow. When you violate God's rules, you pay.
Oh, yes.
And that's the problem. And with the ancient wisdom that you've studied actually shows people that when you seek the truth and you seek wisdom, you will find it if you serve the Most High God.
That's right.
The beginning of wisdom is the end, knowing the end of your knowledge. How's that?
Very good.
Yeah, take care. Again, beforeus.com. Amazing books. And again, we're going to continue every 2 weeks. Jonathan's on here on my show in the third hour on Wednesdays, and he'll be on other times as well. Check the schedules. We'll have them posted up on Nutrimedical.com. And coming up tomorrow in the first hour, we have Deborah Tavares, remarkable issues talking about the mandatory vaccines here in California. The Senate bill is going forward. We're also going to talk about the bill going to the U.S. Senate to stop painful abortions over 20 weeks. We're going to talk about the geoengineered weather and primary water, lots of other topics. And Chris Harris and Professor McKenna will be back tomorrow as well.